constantly adapting to change. And as athletes, when we talk about being on the field, the game can change like that.
Yeah.
Life can change like that. And that's why we always say sports, teaches you a big perspective of life. On the field, off the field.
We've got your game plan.
This is the Val and Ang show.
Where athletes level up in sport and life.
I'm Val.
I'm Ange.
And welcome to episode 2.
All right, let's go. What are we talking about today?
The perspective, your perspective, understanding your perspective, and how do you change a negative perspective.
What do you think of when you think of perspective? Why is it important?
Because, it's things that's aimed at you. How do you view yourself? We as athletes are always in the eye of the sky. So the camera's always on us. And, if we understand ourselves and understand how we view ourselves, doesn't matter what anybody else thinks of us, we're able to, adjust through any adversity or understand how to handle success.
Yeah.
As an athlete, you need to understand your perspective so that way you can understand your purpose even more. What do you think about perspective?
I always say it's the lens that you view yourself, but it's also the lens you view the experiences within athletics and with life. So how do you view difficult relationships? How do you view success? How do you view another person's success that maybe they're getting and you're not? How do you view tough coaching? How do you view loss? How do you view the opponent? How are you viewing your opponent? So I think we can really dive in right now and talk about each one on how we should be flipping that perspective from a negative to a positive, and that helps us build resilience and to keep going, I think.
Yeah, I like that. I like that. But it all comes back to, though, understanding your purpose, understanding your why, correct? With the perspective of yourself is, when you stare yourself in the mirror, how do you view yourself? How do you talk to yourself, right?
Yeah, it starts with you.
And when you stare yourself in that mirror and you look at yourself and you start to understand yourself, you learn a lot about yourself because you answer all your questions. And I always fall victim of this where I always say you got to be honest with yourself.
Yeah.
And you got to be honest and realistic with what you want in life, how you're going to approach it, how you're going to go after it, not worrying about what people think of you, how people perceive you, or, who you're trying to please. Because at the end of the day, you got to stare yourself in the mirror because that lens is on you.
So your shift in perspective, does it happen often? Are you constantly shifting your perspective?
Oh yeah, it's like change.
Yeah.
If I build a shed, I'm gonna tear it down 2 weeks later because I ain't like the way it looked. I'm gonna have to redo it. So it's like I'm constantly adapting to change. And as athletes, when we talk about being on the field, the game can change like that.
Yeah.
Life can change like that. And that's why we always say sports, teaches you a big perspective of life.
Yeah.
And if you can handle that and you can understand that in between these lines, this switch is always on, outside of these lines, I got to deal with a whole different type of game.
Yeah.
And life is just something that, that's in us that we have to figure out along the way. And, it's like when nobody really writes the book on how to be a parent. I have to say, Ange walked in the gym the other day with her nephew, and I'm just like, Ange, when did you get a kid? And I'm like, and just the mothering side to see you just, and I was just like,
it was horrible. He had no shoes on, and I put him in my new Bronco in the front seat with a seatbelt.
Come on, Ange. Come on. You had that young man. You could just see he just embraced
he does love
you.
Me.
and it was one of the most awesome
Special.
things to see, and you could just see, and kudos to this young lady here because she's like that with everybody. No matter what she's going through, she just rise with it, and it's the perspective of how she views things, and she has so much knowledge to give, just from her own experiences, things that she's been through, listening to others, and I had to switch roles here a little bit because motivation stands right in front of you when you think it doesn't. And as young athletes, you need to learn. Young female athletes, you need to learn. Not just from me, but also from Ann. Ann brings a lot to the table here, and
Thanks for souping me up.
well, it's not souping you up. That's not me. I'm no hype man. I keep it real, and I'm gonna keep it real with you at all times. That they look to you for so much guidance, and it's one of the most awesome things that they said. What would Ange say? I'm just like, you need to go ask Ange.
Yeah.
And that's how much respect they have for you, and they're viewing you through their lens.
Well, I think for me, those perspective shifts came instead of the biggest one I've ever had is why instead of saying why is this happening to me, how is this happening for me? And once I learned that, and now that I am in this stage of my life with All In as my business, I know that everything I went through was to prepare me for my purpose to help young athletes, like 100%. So now if something does happen, which the shoes I walk in, I'm like, okay, how can this help somebody else?
Yes.
This bigger picture of, well, if I go through this right now, there will be a conversation that I can have. And this makes my passion burn deeper because I'm like, hey, if you can figure out this mental health stuff at your age and you can use athletics as a way to get stronger, resilient, focused, change your perspective, accountable, then you won't get to this point later on in your life to where you're making choices that aren't healthy for you. So
you're pretty much paving the way for
that's
the ones that are viewing you, the ones that are following you, listening to you, learning from you.
100%. Yeah.
That's awesome. And,
Yeah.
and that's what your purpose is about.
Yeah.
And just changing lives, and when we talk about changing lives, we teach them how to change a negative perspective.
Yeah.
And, if there's something negative happening in their life, how are you going to change it?
Yeah. I want to go through that with you, scenarios. So this one scenario comes up a lot. If an athlete comes to you, they've been training, they don't get accepted for All Shore. How do you help them change their perspective on that?
Well, the one thing is, we talk about the person in the mirror. What did you do to not make that? What did you do to think that you deserve to be there? And just because you didn't make it, does that make you who you are? Does that define who you are? Right? So all the answers are staring right back at you, and you have to answer yourself honestly. And that.
Don't you think that's hard?
It's 100% hard.
Yeah.
I can.
How can we? I think about how to make it easier. How do we make it easier for the kid to have the courage to say,
go harder.
Hey, what was I doing when no one was watching? Oh, I wasn't doing. Well, so then now we fix that. Now you have the resources around you. Yeah, that's important.
I always say go back to the drawing board. I had a conversation with one of my baseball players the other day, and he was a couple weeks ago. He was like, I'm in a slump. I was like, come on now, you know what we do. You go back to the basics. You go back to when you first picked up a bat and they told you see the ball, hit the ball, right? And now you got to understand that.
Yeah.
So when you getting to that slump, always go back to your basics because your basics is your foundation. Right? And now you're back into your purpose. You're back in line with your purpose, and now you can focus on what we need to. And he's going to end up becoming a phenomenal MLB player, but there's going to be trial and tribulations.
Yeah.
And it's how you handle it, not just as an athlete, but also off the field. And that is the big thing, with these athletes, especially these high-power athletes. They don't handle losing sight of their purpose well off the field.
Yes.
And then all of a sudden things start spiraling downhill.
Yeah.
You got to go back to the basics. You got to go back to your homegrown. You got to go back to your structured foundation.
Your habits.
Yeah, and if you created good habits, great habits for yourself along the way, you can stand with honor.
Yeah.
No matter if you're against 100 million person army, you're going to stand with honor.
Yeah.
And you'll always view yourself in a positive light.
Yeah.
High performance takes more than just physical training. It takes mental strength, too. I'm Ange Teeple, and I created the All-In Mental Fitness Program to help athletes like you build confidence, handle pressure, and bounce back from setbacks. Whether it's game day nerves, self-doubt, or burnout, this program gives you the tools to stay focused, resilient, and locked in. Because your mindset is your greatest weapon, and I'm here to help you train it.
One scenario that pops up for me in the past couple weeks is playing a team that you know is so much better than you in your mind. How do you change that perspective to lose the nerves, lose the pressure, and compete? And something that,
Ooh.
yeah, it's a good one. So for me, I've been really thinking about it, and the advice I have been giving is they're the team that will make you better. They're the measuring stick. They will force you to be uncomfortable, and then you will determine who you really are in that failure or that success. If you continue to play mediocre teams that you can, destroy, then that you're never going to have that uncomfortable space where you grow. So the perspective shift is bring it on. I'm going to compete, and
I
I'm
think
ready to
Ange
roll.
was in the gym yesterday where I was just getting after these athletes.
Yeah.
Like, stop being afraid of being uncomfortable.
Yes.
Right?
Yeah. It's true.
Stop being afraid of the struggle. In order to be the best, you got to beat the best.
Yep.
And I'm watching ESPN this morning, and the Knicks beat the Celtics again, who's on paper is a much more superior team. But the Knicks has this resilience to them that you're not going to just beat me. You train like I train, yes. All right? You play like I play. Okay, I'm going to play better. All right. And in order to bring in order to win, you got to be willing to be an animal. You have to be willing to put up the essence of survival. And when you move like that, your energy is different.
Describe animal behavior.
And you tickling the line this morning.
Animal behavior.
Animal mentality is no matter what, the cutest little kitten, the second it feels threatened, it puts up a hiss. It goes into this defense mechanism where, like, no, I got to scratch and claw to fight my way out of this. What do you think somebody's going to do? If you're a true athlete, if you're a true warrior, you're going to put up that defense. You're going to understand your strong points, and you're going to understand your weak points. Let's not bring our weak points out of here. Even if we get down, let's pick up the game of lacrosse. If we get down by 2 goals, is the game over? No, we're in a dogfight.
Yeah.
Let's talk about football. If I'm down 14-7 going in a half, this is a ball game. We got to find a way to win this. But it all comes back to, what did you do before?
Yeah.
Did you have that animal mentality? Did you have the habits? Were you that player that ran away from the struggle? It got hard. And then all of a sudden now it comes back to your perspective. Did you lose sight of your perspective in that moment? Because it got hard.
Yeah.
Because somebody hit you. Because somebody punched you. That means you have fear in you. How could you fear somebody else that walks just like you?
Yeah. Ooh.
We got to fight for this. We got to fight for this. And if we're going to fight for this, and then your teammates would feed off of that. There's a lot of great athletes out there that will feed off each other's energy. And if you feed off your teammates' energy, and it can be somebody on the bench that's just yelling.
Doesn't have to be a star.
It doesn't have to be a star, because that star is now going to be the person that's going to make that play.
Yeah.
It might be one of the role players that come out and make a phenomenal defensive play.
Yeah.
All of a sudden, you got life back in the team. And the most dangerous team is the ones that have nothing to lose. It's like, it's like you never see a shark coming because it's coming from the bottom. You know.
Well, sometimes you see the fin, and you're like,
That's when it's at the top.
Yeah.
That's when it's lurking for something. But right, them sharks that come from the bottom, they come to snatch you, and they going, you know, and you know that's just the game.
Yeah.
That's just the game of sports. That's, you know, got to roll with it and learn within that moment because you can get taken away from it rapidly fast.
Yeah. I want to offer a little perspective shift for coaches who have to remember, maybe I would say more high school coach, remembering who the athlete is in front of them and the expectation that they have on them. The expectation should always be high. But what is the perspective if, like, you don't just quit on a kid because they're not performing? We have to dive into why that isn't that kid performing. I mean, we're in 14, 15, 16, 17-year-old brains here that are developed maybe only 50%. And we expect all of this out of them. So how do we switch that perspective for these coaches to be like, hey, I'm part of that development, so what do I need to do to help them get to that space? What do you do as a trainer to help them get there?
Well, let me talk to them as a coach. You know, as a coach, you have to create depth. And you're going to have young kids that are not as developed as your seniors and juniors. You know, and we go into the season with the expectations of every kid. You know, for me, when I sit down and I look at a depth chart, and I put every single kid that's on my team on the depth chart. And I'm going to show them, like, listen, this is where you are on the depth chart. This is your motivation to go be number one, right? Just because this person's up here doesn't mean that you don't have to work towards that, right? And I give them every opportunity.
Yeah.
Every opportunity to keep getting better. And how do you feed a player like that? How do you feed a young player? I got to make sure I build their confidence.
Yes.
Because if a player steps on the field and they're not confident, but, well, I don't know. Well, that's a failure on the coach's part.
Yes.
So, and it doesn't matter what the kid says or does or anything like that. We have to make sure we're constantly educating them. Because as a coach, we're an educator, we're a mentor, right? They come to us for guidance. They're looking to us to put them in the best position to be successful. And if we don't do that as a coach, then we're going to fail as a team. You know, so I always say, give me my best 22. Okay, these are my best 22 that's going to play. My young players, all right, I got to start building y'all up. So,
but how do you deal with, okay, so you say, I'm going to play my best 22. And you look at your team and you say, I'm going to play my best 22. But I think you have to define best, because the kids that aren't that 22.
Well, it's how well they listen, retain, and
So
execute.
it's their perspective shift of, okay, I'm not the best, but I still can be.
Yeah, exactly.
That's the perspective shift from them.
In the game of football, there's three phases. There's offense, defense, and special teams.
Yes.
All right. So special teams, I'm going to build confidence for these young players.
Yeah.
And then I'm going to feed them little by little.
Yeah.
Right. On the defense and the offensive side. All right. Okay. And then we're going to bring them along. All right. And in a let's say 11-game season.
Yeah.
We can't be the same person.
No.
That we were in preseason, right?
No.
So I got to make sure you're constantly getting better.
But you're also evaluating all of them as you go.
Because we're talking about building.
Yes, you're building
a culture.
We're
building a culture for when these seniors are now done and we send them off, what's the next phase coming? Right? And listen, and if a sophomore or freshman is better than the seniors up in front, right, we got to give them the nod. We got to play the best.
Yeah.
Right? And then we got to make sure everybody else is developing as well.
Yes.
So I'm never going to write off a kid.
No. Okay.
You know, so, and it's the same way in performance training, speed and agility. All right? If you're not getting it, we're going to slow it down.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
So that way you get it.
Yeah.
And I'll take you to the side in a class of 20, 30, make sure you're understanding it.
Yeah.
And then we get you caught up to speed.
Yeah. It's the same space of like mental fitness. Like what work are you putting in to gain that confidence? Confidence just doesn't come to you. It's something that you have to work on.
Yes.
And if you're not working on it through your standards, which we talked about last time, through your habits, through your behaviors, then you're not going to get it. And if you're not working on that, then you struggle. to get to that next performance.
And they got to understand it doesn't happen overnight. It's
No.
just not. Right? It happens over time.
Yep.
And
Yep.
your skill sets will have to get developed. You know, just like your work ethic has to get developed. Just because I failed at 30 minutes a day, next time you come back, okay, I want to fail at 35, 40. Or
Yes.
I'm going to stay and I'm going to go a little bit harder.
Yeah. It's the small steps.
You know, and those kids don't always reap the benefits of success
Yeah.
right away.
Yeah.
They reap it later on in life.
Yep.
You know, and you know, stay trying to be perfect, no matter who's judging you.
Yeah.
Right? People are always going to say what they are. People are always going to have a view of you, right? But it's what you believe in.
Yeah.
You know, I could tell you how many times people probably think about me. Listen, it is what it is.
Yeah. You're
I
not
don't
going to
care.
make everybody happy. Yeah.
I am who I am because of how I structured myself.
Yeah.
And if you don't like me for who I am,
Yeah. That's it.
you don't get my energy.
Yeah. No.
You know, and you know, we just keep going, you know, because if we turn the lens off, you got to keep going.
You can't turn the lens off. You have to shift the lens.
Shift the lens.
Okay.
See that? She caught on to it. Can't turn it off. Right?
You can't. You just
Yeah.
it's got to always be on. You're always visionary. You're always looking, but it's the way you look that matters. So, I think in conclusion, like perspective is a choice that we have to make in every aspect of the game because that transfers to life. But let's leave them with one more Valism. What do you got?
I think we hit it on this a little bit earlier, but you know, be honest with yourself, right? And one of my coaches gave this to me, who spent a lot of time with me, and I have it in my weight room at home. And it's, you know, the first sign of a true relationship is honesty, and you always got to be honest with yourself. What about you?
Perspective is
Give me some Angelism.
Angism. I would say perspective is happening all around you in every situation. How you view it is going to determine where you go next. And you've got to be able to shift it in a way that is going to benefit you. If you shift it negatively, that will be a domino effect of everything happening in your athletic career and your life. So you've got to continuously be ready to shift that perspective, which starts with being honest with yourself.
Turn a negative into a positive.
Let's go. All right.
I like it.
Till next time.
Till next time. The Val and Ang Show, episode 2.